Hi everybody, I'm going to cover a few points here. Please listen to this video to the end. I'm going to try my best to keep it under 30 minutes. I might not succeed, but because I'm going to connect quite a lot of dots here to share some very, very important information. These are not times for complacency. We need to be on the ball. We need to be absolutely alert and aware of what is going on, because things are moving fast. This New World Order agenda with its neo-Nazi fascist policies is happening thick and fast throughout the world now, and they are riding on abuses of power, crime, blatant crime, and even rigged elections, and we have plenty of evidence here to support lawful suspicion and really shame on the Labour Party for not calling this out and standing with the people in these questions in face of the lawful evidence. So I'll leave you this link, please do check it out. Now, we're going to start with this Telegraph journalist who suggested that a coronavirus cull of the elderly could benefit the economy. Obviously, for those affected, it is a human tragedy, whatever the age, but this is a piece about economics, not the sum of human misery. You can see what they've done there. They're separating economics from humanity, as if, economics is an independent thing in this universe, on our planet, from humanity, when the fact is that without humanity there would be no economy, and economy is supposed to actually benefit humanity, benefit life, and if it's not, then it's a crime. We need to understand that, because things that are happening that are detrimental to life, not just the life of humanity, but to the life even of our planet, that's a crime. The law supports life, okay? The law supports life. So this is being presented here in my daughter's army blogs here. Now then, we also have it picked up here on the Metro. Could prove mildly beneficial to the UK economy by killing off elderly Britons. Okay. And, he's basically, this guy, Jeremy Warner, that's come out with this, he was analysing the US making an emergency interest rate cut to protect the economy against coronavirus. And we know that America's just given something like $1 trillion+ to the financial sections in order to protect them from the impacts of coronavirus. They've got $1 trillion suddenly to spend, and a very similar thing is happening in Britain. Now we have here this other very serious development. The elderly could be quarantined for 4 months in wartime-style mobilisation to combat coronavirus, writes Robert Peston. But then when you read the article, and this is from ITV News, it isn't could, it's will. People over 70 will be instructed by the government to stay in strict isolation at home or in care homes for 4 months under a wartime-style mobilisation effort by the government, likely to be enforced within the next 20 days. So that means that members of the public will not be able to enter care homes to visit their parents or elderly relatives. Okay, these care homes will be under lockdown. And we did see this before in 2014-2015, when suddenly the Britain's annual death rate of influenza doubled. It's 17,000 a year die of regular strains of flu virus, because it's not just, when people say flu, we're not talking about one virus, we're talking about a multitude of coronaviruses that come under the name flu. Okay, 17,000 people a year die of these various strains. Nobody bats an eyelid about it. But in 2014 to 2015, and I'll leave you the link, it doubled. I think it was something like 35,000. And I remember, because I was getting pleas for help from staff who were working in nursing homes, who were told not to come to work, and who were told they weren't allowed to talk to the press, and from members of the public who had relatives in those homes who weren't allowed to go and see them, and how these old people were just dying in their thousands, 35,000. You know, we're talking an extra 17,000 deaths from the average, the yearly average. It doubled in 2014 to 2015 under this Tory government. Okay, so is this another type plan? Is that you lock the elderly people, put them under house arrest, deny them their human rights of freedom of movement, discriminate against them as a social group, pit the public against them, get the public to see them as a threat, like, oh, look, an elderly person exposing themselves to coronavirus, and they're more likely to get it, and they're going to end up in hospital, and that means they'll be taking up funding and NHS the provisions that should be going to could be going to my child or even me. You see, oh, there's an elderly person, quick, go and report them to the police. They're over 70. I mean, are they going to have them on tag? And basically, it's basically prohibiting Jeremy Corbyn from even entering into Parliament, isn't it? Because he's over 70. So how's he going to enter Parliament if he's going to be under house arrest as a 70-year-old? This is absolutely outrageous. It really is. You know, it is. They are talking about wartime-style mobilisation. So let's have a look at Spain, what they're doing for wartime mobilisation. Okay, this is from the Squawk Box. Spanish government shows way, takes control of all healthcare, including private and PHARMA, to combat coronavirus. That's what happens in wartime situation. That's what Britain did in the Second World War, and even they did it fully in the Second World War. They nationalised industry, they nationalised transport systems. Okay? Because they needed, it was a wartime emergency situation, a state of national emergency. Then in that case, you take control of the private sectors and turn them for public use. But oh no, not in Britain. Not in Britain. In Britain, what you do is you apply a wartime situation to the elderly. You make them suffer wartime-style mobilisation. Okay? You make the poorest and weakest and most vulnerable people. Because, like I say, what's going to be happening to them in strict isolation at home? Apparently, they're going to have to speak to a doctor through the phone or internet. Well, what if they don't have the internet or even a phone? Or they aren't even capable of using them very well if they have? And what, are they just going to be left to die in their homes? Like, oh, I'm sorry, love, we're snowed under at the moment with this coronavirus stuff. No, we can't come out and treat you. We'll send somebody. Just leave them to die in their home. Who's going to know? Boris Johnson is suggesting that members of the public can be relied on to keep an eye on them. Well, I'm sure we're all going to be going around knocking on people's doors in case an elderly person might be living there. Encouraging the public to report on them, creating this sense of fear and using that age-old strategy of this, in order to protect people, by protecting us. It is a protection racket that, in protecting us, they're actually putting us at greater risk. They're placing us at greater risk. And I'm very concerned about elderly people who are living in flats and haven't even got a garden to step out into to get some fresh air. And that is a right that they should be able to, it's vital really for elderly people to have a short walk every day. So this is dangerous. And but what's happening in Britain instead? Oh, they are funding private hospitals to the tune of 2.4 million a day. It amounts to about 75 million a year. Sorry, 75 million a month, right? to deal with the coronavirus. Elderly will be told to self-isolate for 4 months, but they're going to be giving private corporate health corporations that are actually, the vast majority of them only exist in Britain because they've been diverting funds from the NHS into private interests and even benefiting from government subsidies. And now they're all there ready to make yet again profit out of human suffering. Okay? And who is it that has actually got interest in this private health service? Who is going to be receiving the 2.4 million a day? Who are they? Let's have a look. Oh, look, the whole Tory cabinet, the whole Tory party, the leading Tory members, there they all are. All got business interests and will profit from the privatised NHS. All who will be profiting from elderly people being forced to stay at home because basically, let's face the facts of it, the government does not want to fork out extra money for the NHS to look after the elderly people who've worked hard all their lives and paid into this society and earned the profits that are keeping this entire financial system afloat, who've actually suffered worse. You know, they haven't had the benefits that the youth growing up through the 80s and 90s had for a brief period before it all gets taken away. And then, meantime, look at what these private corporations do. You know, the health service, National Health Service, has already been gutted from within by, you know, privatising things like catering and cleaning and this and that. And here we are, Lewisham Hospital workers walk out and demand to be paid and protected. Cleaning and catering and portering staff have walked out of Lewisham Hospital after private sector ISS failed to pay their wages or provide protective clothing. They've had no wages. They can't afford food or to pay their rent or bus fares. Has delayed wage payments, underpaid, or in some cases workers have not been paid at all. And they've come out on strike. This is what you get. This is what you get from the corporation. Okay? That's the kind of thing these people profit from. Yeah, privatise that section of the NHS. The government doesn't have to spend that. Instead, that money can go into our pockets and start building our private healthcare service up. And when we have a national emergency, we'll make the elderly workforce, the elderly of the workforce, suffer the wartime strategies, okay? And, you know, to ourselves, we'll all earn big profits out of it. Now, I'm going to show this article here now, which really does expose the true agenda, and we are talking absolute Nazism. This is Nazism, okay? Neo-fascist, neo-Nazi fascism. That is what we are dealing with. And this is a memo that's been leaked. It was written by Christine Lagarde, for your eyes only, from the coalition. That's what they call themselves. You know, George Bush's coalition of the willing, okay? You know, the far-right extremist governments that's now controlling America and Israel and Britain, and is wheedled its way into Europe and is you know, attacking Europe from within, attacking everything that our forebears had suffered how many years for, went through 2 world wars to get our human rights and to establish our democratic socio-capitalist societies. Not communism, nothing harsh, nothing extremist, you know, live with compassion, care for the environment, uphold human rights, progress. But instead we're being governed by these same people who've made all their money through these fascist corporations that are destroying the planet against our wishes, who refuse point blank to invest in eco-energy, in cleaning up the planet. They don't want to pay people living wages. They would rather kill millions and millions, if not billions of people in order to keep their agendas and their power structures going and their privileged lifestyles. Okay? And then they poison us with their filth that they produce, that they insist we must work for to produce. Otherwise, there's no benefits. You get no healthcare, you get no money, you go to work. You're going to work for us, you're going to do what we tell you. Otherwise, you're going to be homeless begging on the street. And then the filth that they produce actually makes people ill. So people, by the time that even before they get to retirement age, people are dying of various illnesses that are caused directly through these corporations. Stuff like Alzheimer's, for example, we know is directly related to aluminium. Alzheimer's and dementia. A lot of these things are due directly to aluminium, lead, and a host of pollutants. And various other illnesses, like diabetes, for example, to do with diet, the Western diet. I mean, look, they want us to pay every way. They are literally vampires. Okay? Now, this is really disturbing. This secret memo was discovered in the wastebasket of a high-ranking staffer in the European Commission. It was sent to us by Dr. Morgan Roth Gillette, author of Ending Ageism or How Not to Shoot Old People. The memo from the coalition begins, Dear Angela, Theresa, Emmanuel, and has a further list of names, heads of state and secretaries or ministers of finance, health and human services, mostly scribbled over with marker. Monthly Review is pleased to be publishing this important leaked document here for the first time. And I'm going to leave you the link to this. I'm just going to read you very few little parts of it to give you the flavour and gist of what is going on here. But basically, you know, they're pushing the agenda now, the statement that old people live too long. And apparently at Davos, everyone was repeating the message. You know, that meeting at Davos recently, all the world leaders attended and financiers and corporate interests and what have you. And, you know, the coalition welcomes this new moment for advancing our sensible, coordinated agenda toward the superannuated, increasingly justified, as all our budgets are swallowed up by entitlements. Our streets and ICUs are clogged with old people, medical expenses for the senile are soaring, and adult children are burdened with costs and guilt, which of course they wouldn't be if we were living in a democratic socio-capitalist society that gave people universal health care and treated the elderly with compassion. Because the elderly are a very precious resource and they do serve the workforce. You know, so many young parents rely on their elders to help look after children. They help in so many ways. I mean, personally, I don't know, as a child, what I would have done without my nana and my grandma. They were so dear and so precious to me. And this idea that, you know, people can be treated like cattle, basically, you know, herd, let coronavirus run through the herd. As you know, that is exactly their attitude towards the general public. We are cattle and they are the farmers. And like any farmer, you know, the cow's got old. No, we're not going to give it a nice retirement. And now it's spent its life suffering to earn millions for the farmer. No, instead we're just going to kill it now because we're not going to waste land to feed it. We're not going to waste vet bills to treat it for its illnesses. Just let it die. Because that is what is going on here. Depopulation agenda, you see. Because they don't want to change. They want to get rid of us and then they can establish their little utopia. But being as they're all totally insane, they are incapable of establishing any utopia because they are fundamentally... Their intelligence is fundamentally negated because they are attempting to realise the plans and schemes and dreams of dead fascists. Okay, the fascists, the imperial fascists of Victorian Britain basically is the agendas that they are trying to fulfil now. And it's like, look, I'm sorry, this is dead, go away. You know, we are alive and kicking, but they are working very hard now to persuade the public to accept, to swallow this now, and to move with this agenda of basically demonising the elderly. So while exploiting this opening for positive action, this encrypted memo is not for distribution. Its frank and open discussion of the greying nation's problem means holding its suggestions within a tight circle. Please print and delete. And, you know, they talk about Alzheimer's, which I've just said, Alzheimer's directly related to aluminium. So why are they still producing it? Why are we still using it? Okay. But apparently the press keep on repeating the percentage of old people alive now in your country and projecting the appallingly larger numbers in the future, along with percentages of dementia cases now and later, is a foolproof tactic for creating fruitful anxiety and underscoring the need for dramatic bipartisan responses to the crisis. And that's just exactly what we've witnessed with Labour, in the sense that the two main parties of Labour and Tory will once again become more or less the same thing. So apparently some wimps and weps will complain about ageism. But, you know, letters to the editor or columns that battle over how to respond to a trivial nomenclature issues are a useful distraction from our economic agenda, because that's what we're talking about. That they pass it off as economics, but you're talking about control, you're talking about a Nazi agenda, we're talking about a cull, okay? It is, I mean, the stuff that she says in here is absolutely, it is incredible, actually. For years, we have clearly stated that reducing expectations would work. Calling anger at inequality divisive class warfare is a recommendation we support, now that unionisation has been discredited for providing overpaid jobs for subordinate groups who clearly do not merit special scrutiny. So, subordinate groups, well, I take it that these people would be considered a subordinate group, okay? When in actual fact, the subordinate group is the very coalition that is coming up with these kind of strategies. And don't forget, I mean, she even celebrates here the fact of how much they have control over the media to push this agenda. But this statement here is absolute proof of the neo-Nazi fascism that I am talking about here, because that is exactly a Nazi strategy. And, you know, absolutely explicit of, you blame the victims of your crime, you accuse the victims of your crime of the very crime that you are guilty of. So it is them who are imposing divisive class warfare against us, okay? And anybody who talks about inequality, say ageism against elderly people, and start talking about inequality like I'm explaining, well, apparently I'm guilty of divisive class warfare. You know. Get people to, you know, we suggest that as inequality rises, you divert attention from class envy to age-related schadenfreude, pitting generation against generation. In comment sections and op-eds, young Americans, without being paid to say so, allegedly, voluntarily deride anyone trusting in US Treasury bonds. They angrily return on ageing boomers who they firmly believe will be the last generation to receive benefits. This belief leads to inaction. We intend to make this belief a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, again, Schadenfreude, this is a German word, and it is exactly this concept of Schadenfreude that allowed Germany to develop into Nazism in the first place, and allowed them to be able to do what they did to Jews. So here we have the trustworthy Guardian here, covert neo-fascist. This is in 2018, The Secret Joys of Schadenfreude. Well, the author of this article suggests that Britain hasn't got a word for Schadenfreude, which, this is what Schadenfreude means, is to the experience of pleasure, joy or self-satisfaction that comes from learning of or witnessing the troubles, failures or humiliation of another. You know, this idea of, oh, you know, you witness people really struggling and it makes you feel really secure and smug and safe and happy and thankful that you're not suffering like that. Or to actually feel pleasure and get fun out of witnessing people suffering. And so, you know, like I say, the author of this article says Britain hasn't got a word for Schadenfreude, but actually we have. It's called sadism. Sadism. That's what sadism is. Enjoyment and pleasure out of suffering. Enjoyment and pleasure. Making profits. Enjoyment and pleasure out of imposing human suffering. Ian Duncan Smith thoroughly enjoyed murdering 200,000 British people with an economic policy titled austerity. Okay? So, you know, this is what we are dealing with. Now, as I say, I'll leave you the article. Please, please, please read it. But, you know, this section here. Old men who become suddenly homeless can be portrayed as the victims of their vices. But demented old women on street corners, begging or crying, will almost certainly need a different publicity campaign to make this seem inevitable. And that's the idea, you see, to, as it said before, make it become a self-fulfilling prophecy, that people will just accept that, look, once you're old, you're useless, you should really just disappear. And because otherwise you're just taking resources from the young. If you really care about your children, you won't allow yourself to become old and decrepit. You'll work till you're 70 and then, you know, maybe you'll go and kill yourself. To make people depressed about becoming old. The trope of unwelcoming boomer daughter, perhaps. Boomer daughter, so, you know, they're moving that far into the future now, not just the baby boomers, the elderly today, that they're calling the elderly today, baby boomers. Okay, now, in the future, it's going to pass on to boomer daughter. The problem is that old women, although they live longer, retain some prestige as mothers and grandmothers, and thus present the main public relations difficulty in this sector. We have been suggesting using ungendered terminology like old people. Since everyone knows old people are sexless, this usage is not likely to be noticed, let alone attacked. So, you know, as we go down here, as long as costly overtreatment remains the target of choice in the mainstream, as long as the acquiescent press, the controlled press, likens Alzheimer's patients to zombies, as long as editors publish the very natural concerns of adult children about the soaring costs of parental medical choices, as long as every economic downturn or voluminous tax cut produces deficit worries and increased long-term unemployment, this trend toward demoralising generation after generation about getting old will grow. In reducing numbers of the superannuated people in their middle years who have become permanently unemployed have been committing suicide in increasing numbers. You know, drive down the economy, drive people to suicide. Some from opioid overdoses, according to several reports from the US. So-called deaths of despair among older men have become common. Old women, despite fearing becoming burdens to their children, hang on. In response, the consortium suggests that age shaming, to which older women seem more easily prone, may be the simplest means by which to achieve ... Okay, and you know, that is why I say we do need to sue. We need to get together, recognise the rigged election, the lawful evidence, call them out, bring a class action, sue them for damages, sue this Tory party for damages of what they have done. And this is criminal. We are talking, like I say, sadism is criminal. Now, before I leave, I do want to share this with people because it is so important. Advice to everybody, and especially the elderly, that if you want one of the, washing your hands, not touching your face, apparently 70% of us are going to contract this virus, okay, regardless of what protective measures we take. Especially people who are having to work and deal with the public. I mean, I was horrified. Went to Tesco, the amount of people they were having to deal with. Tesco, all the millions that they make, had not given the workers even a face mask or gloves, nothing. Absolutely outrageous. So now this is very, very, very important. Eating any kind of sugar has the potential to reduce your body's defences by 75% or more for 4 to 6 hours. And we're talking about a biscuit raises your blood sugar level to about 120, cake, cookies, candy, soda, or even drinking fruit juice, because even fruit sugars can, severely impair your immune system for things like fighting viruses. And here it explains of how the body responds. You absorb vitamin C into your white blood cells, 50 times concentration it needs to be to successfully surround and inhibit a virus or vastly reduce its impacts on you, vastly weaken it. But if you eat sugar, then these white blood cells absorb the sugar, and so there isn't enough room, you see. There's only 13 times concentration of vitamin C, because so your immune system's 75% weaker. So if you really wish to protect yourself, I would strongly suggest buying yourself some 1,000 milligram timed release vitamin C. I think you can safely take between 1 and 3,000 a day. If I'm coming down with a cold or through the winter season, I will take 3,000 a day. A lot of people wouldn't be able to cope with that, but I'm vegan. And also another thing, vitamin D3 is vital. The top concentration of vitamin D3, please do take that every day. We're not getting enough sunlight. Vitamin D3 is a hormone that again helps to fight viruses, all infections. It is a vital hormone. Please get yourself some vitamin D3 and vitamin C. You want 1,000 milligram timed release, or if not, get 500 milligrams, take 2 of them. But please do this, and please cut sugar out of your diet. Just this one simple thing, by cutting sugar out of our diet, will vastly reduce the impact of coronavirus throughout our country. And obviously the government isn't going to tell you to do this. You're not going to hear that from this lot, okay? Because, if everybody stops eating sugar, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to the corporate sugar industries? What's going to happen to the corporate sweet factories that are now litter Britain, earning money for global corporations while destroying our immune systems? And instead of giving us advice like this, advising elderly people and everybody actually to, just stop eating sugar, okay? Oh no, instead, we'll put elderly people under house arrest. We'll give this lot, a share of, each one of them a share of 2 million a day through their private health corporations. And we'll, ban Jeremy Corbyn from attending Parliament, okay? And we'll all start getting connected to the secret joys of Schadenfreude. Basically, we'll all become sadists, and even ITV, this is the kind of covert thing they do. They're showing an old lady there, look, with the gold rings on, look, holding on to her wealth. Look, people, they've got money, these old people. When they die, who's going to be getting her rings? This is the kind of evil that they are promoting, and we need to stand up to it, and we need to stand up strong. So, God bless, love to everybody. Stay strong, stay positive. Jesus did explain that half the money belongs to God. You know, these taxes that we want these corporations to pay now. We look at women having to produce the next generation, the pain, the suffering, the blood, sweat and tears, the expense that goes into that. They don't get a penny off these corporations when their children grow to be earning money for these corporations, who then turn around and say, oh, we're not paying for maternity leave, we're not paying for a social security net, we're not paying for social housing, we're not paying for universal education and healthcare. It's like, but they're expecting us to produce their workforces, for them to exploit, for them to kill, for them to enjoy their schadenfreude sadism and live up big and come out with this neo-Nazi fascist garbage, absolute filth and evil, okay, and put it on the public, and even conspire to drive people to suicide just at the thought of getting old. So as people reach 50 and 60, they start to get so depressed that they actually kill themselves. And even women who are hanging on because they love their grandchildren, because they've actually produced them, okay, through their own children. It's like, shame them, shame them. Oh my gosh, please people, you know, that is why corporate taxes, when people are that filthy rich, it's actually a crime, because they've made their money through exploitation, direct exploitation, and they're actually enjoying human misery and profiting from every type of death. They are a death culture, and it is absolutely despicable that, you know, they refuse to pay taxes, because it isn't actually a tax, it's a duty, it's a duty, okay? Because when there's no limits on how rich somebody can get, and by what means, then there is no limits on how poor people can get either. That is the fact of it, and we do need a limit. And these people, you know, what we're asking them to pay, it isn't taxes, it's a duty. And that's why they want Brexit, to avoid paying their taxes, to avoid honouring their duty to humanity, to the living life of our planet, that they are exploiting, that they are profiting from. God did not create this universe and this planet to keep a set of sadists happy under the collective name of the coalition, apparently all secretly enjoying the joys of schadenfreude, okay? That is the fact of it. So, you know, and France, the people of France, they've stood up now, and they've come out despite the lockdowns, because, you know, to campaign against what their corporatisation of their nation. Now they've come out, they've broken the coronavirus blockades, you know, they've come out, and like Jesus said, you know, when you fight in a battle for your human rights, you can't be worried about getting hurt. You know, when you're fighting good against good, standing up against evil, you know, yes, we are putting ourselves at risk of getting hurt, but that's the nature of the battle that we are forced to fight now, because they are the ones that are waging war against us, and we're just standing around in a daze, really, in a daze of confusion that they keep us in, with help of the BBC, with help of the media. And that's why I make this video, to share the information with you, to wake you up and put people on track of like, look, this is where we are, this is what we need to do, and we do need to act. Like I say, forget about the risk of coronavirus. If you eat right, you know, take the advice. I tell you now, we can survive this, and we will stand up for our rights, and we will not allow them to turn Britain into a corporate crown tax haven territory. Okay? We will hold all of these criminals to account, and we will not be forcing our elderly into under house arrest and criminalising them. We will not be doing that. We will be imposing wartime-style, okay, onto these private hospitals, that they are going to fund it. We've got 200,000 dead already on behalf of these evil people. It is time we stood up to them and stood up for our rights. And Jeremy Corbyn, you know, Jeremy Corbyn is going to be attending Parliament. He is not going to be basically imprisoned in his own home. So, you know, I've gone 10 minutes over my projected time of 30 minutes, but I hope that this helps people. I hope it empowers you. I send you love and strength, and God bless to everybody.